John Wooden is quoted as saying, "A great coach can change a game, but a truly great coach can change a life, shaping not just skills, but also the character of their players." Let's talk about character through coaching on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it relates to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to be here with FHU Athletic Director Jonathan Estes. Jonathan, welcome to the program.
Appreciate it, Matt. Appreciate being here, getting this thing started. One of my friends talks about the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, so I'm glad to be here to start this step with you.
I mean, man, you always have some good quotes too. Like, one of the things that you do a lot of chapel talks here at Freed-Hardeman, and there's always memorable things that you say. Like, one of them was like, we need to be like sequoia trees. And I know that we always kind of joke with you about that one, but you always have different things. You opened the show with a good quote there. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I've known you for quite a while. I came back to Freed-Hardeman in 2013, and you began coaching at Freed, I believe, in 2009. So you came back after a few different things that you did as far as coaching and professional career and things like that. So I know you pretty well, but our listeners might not. So give us a little bit of background about some prior experience that you've had with maybe your playing career and coaching, things like that.
I started out of high school at Division I, St. Louis University, playing baseball. Obviously, that's my background as an athlete. I played high school basketball as well, and was pretty decent player as well in high school basketball, but I was just a better baseball player, so I ended up pursuing that at the collegiate level and spent a year at St. Louis University and then transferred to Freed-Hardeman, spent my last 3 years here and graduated and was actually drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals and spent 3 years playing professionally with them. And it was really during that time of playing professionally that I kind of started to see myself as a coach.
Yeah.
Growing up in St. Louis areas where I grew up, and my dad was a high school baseball, basketball, football coach and taught math at a high school there in suburban St. Louis. And I knew what the coaching life was all about, but I didn't ever really see myself doing it until starting to play professional baseball and doing that. And I started to look and say, I can't imagine going into an office,
Right.
and sitting down at a desk. Like, I like being outside. I like working with people. I like playing the game. And there's so much in sports that we can teach young people. And that's where I really started to say, you know what, I want to do this. So when my playing career was over, I jumped right into the opportunity to start coaching and actually started coaching some high school basketball while I was playing. I'd play, March through September.
Yeah.
So I was available to coach. So I coached a freshman team of a high school basketball team for a few years while I was playing. So that's kind of really how it got started. And, my first job at the collegiate level was at Harris-Stowe State University, which is a historically black college in St. Louis. And I was really lucky to get a job at such an early age, head coaching job at the collegiate level. So I was 26 when I got that job, and my brother had played there and graduated there, and the AD knew him really well, and he was actually my first assistant coach. He had just graduated, so it was a great way to get my career started. But I've always had coaching all around me, and is something that I've had good examples, and have had bad examples,
Right.
Of coaches, and so I've always kind of known. About coaching, but like I said, until I really got into playing professional baseball, had not seen myself in that role. So that's kind of where that journey went.
Yeah, and obviously you were a pretty successful player within your time at Freed-Hardeman. I was actually looking up some information about you before you came in here, some of your background information on that, and you have, I think, this might not be as if this was on the website, so this might not be accurate, but career ERA still hold the record, 2.72 ERA career throughout your time at Freed-Hardeman, and complete games pitched 25. So I guess if you have an ERA that's that low, you can pitch longer innings and have more complete games. So
yeah, when I came here, things have changed a lot just in baseball, collegiate baseball since I played. Bats have gone through multiple levels of difference. So you see a lot better pitching numbers now than you did when I was playing. In fact, My freshman year of college was the year that they went from drop 5 bats to drop 3 bats.
Yeah.
So I think the average Division One ERA was like a 5.8 ERA was
Yeah.
the average ERA. So now you don't see you see way lower ERAs when
Yeah.
you're watching college baseball. So I think when I graduated from Freed-Hardeman, we had about 13 different records that they kept track of single season and career, and I held 9 of those when I graduated. And then I've coached
Slow. Yeah.
players. I've coached players that
That
have
have beaten
broken
them.
those
Yeah.
records, which has been really
Well, that's
cool.
okay though, because you
Yeah,
could still take a little credit for some of those, right? So,
yeah.
and so you coached from 2009 for over a decade, so around until about 2022, and then you've been athletic director since then. Tell me a little bit about the difference between kind of how that is as the long time as being a coach and how the transition has been as far as, there's probably things you like about each of them. There's probably things you miss about coaching, but kind of talk about that transition, how that's been for you.
The people ask me that a lot over the last 3 years. Just I loved coaching. I still do coach. I coach I have 2 sons that are in high school, and I coach their summer baseball teams, and I coach my daughter's youth basketball. So I'm still involved in coaching. To a certain degree, you could say that I'm still coaching. Just coaches. I'm coaching coaches now,
Right.
and working with them. We've got a lot of young coaches on our staff, and getting an opportunity to work with them. So I still get an opportunity to try to educate and try to help. And that's really at the core of the reason why I was a coach, is because I love serving and I love trying to empower and encourage young people and to have the same type of experiences that I had as a player. So I get to do some of that coaching still. I miss some of the locker room and the really close relationships
Yeah.
that you get with players, and just going back and thinking about some of the players that played for me over the years. Just some of those guys were a complete mess when they came in as a
Yeah.
freshman, and then to see where they are as they graduate and even 5 years afterwards, and to see the growth that they made. Like some of those relationships, I don't get some of those now as an athletic director, because I'm not developing as close of relationships with some of those guys. And so I miss some of that, and just I'm a very competitive person by nature
Yeah.
too, and having to find ways to fill that competitive void
Yeah.
has also been a transition for me. But I do that with some racquetball and some basketball,
Intramural
intramural
basketball. We've been
basketball.
known to play some intramural basketball together, and yeah, there is a little competitive edge going on there. I like it though. We helps us win some games. So we were thinking about, we talked about some of the success you had at Freed-Hardeman. Went on to play for the Cardinals for 3 years in the St. Louis Cardinals organization. So you mentioned something earlier that kind of piqued my interest here. So you mentioned that sometimes you don't always see things when you're in the middle of it, but as you kind of went throughout your career, you kind of recognize these different things you wanted to do as coach, and you wanted to do some coaching opportunities and things like that. I think the same can be true with when we're talking about today, character through coaching. Sometimes when you're in the middle heat of the competition, you don't always see maybe the way that you should do things. And then looking back, you're like, this is probably the way I should have done some things. Maybe I should have done some things differently. So I think that's sometimes the way character can be. So as a coach, just from your experience as a coach, how would you define character just in the context of athletes and trying to develop that in them? What would you say your definition of character would be?
Well, as a Christian, that's where it starts for me. Is trying to exemplify the characteristics that Christ had, and we talk a lot about love, and we talk a lot about grace, and we talk a lot about those things that Christ showed, and we want to do that to each other. And I think it's really important for all coaches early in their career, if not before they get started, but at least early in their career, they need to really sit down, coaches do, and decide who they want to be. Because when you get in the heat of competition, sometimes everybody's seen that you become somebody that you're not, or
Right.
or you can go off. So you need to really define what those principles that you want to stand for, and what you want to be known for. And I told our players whenever I coach them, and even when I get a chance to speak with groups now, what do you want people to say at your eulogy?
Mm.
What do you want people to say at your Hall of Fame speech? What are the things that you want people to define you and say about you at the end of your career, at the end of your life? And those are the things that you need to go about right now and try to live those out. So when we talk about character, it's what are the core principles that you want to live out on a daily basis, and we need to go out and we need to teach these young people what that looks like,
Mm.
and show them a lot of examples of what that looks like, not only in our lives but also in the lives of the people that they look up to and around, and then try to help them grow in those areas, because character and just moral principles and things of that nature, it's not something that you're going to just be able to put a check next to
Yeah.
this, like I've got this figured out.
Yeah, it's
It's something.
kind of an ongoing process, and
Yeah.
when we think about character, at least when I'm looking at it, it's one of those things. It's not just one action that defines it. It's kind of a sum of all the different things that you've done in your life or throughout your playing career, and you kind of become known for that. And that's kind of what, to me, what character is. It's how you're perceived by others, and a lot of times that's a lot of different actions, not just maybe one thing.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and we're not perfect. People that I know that are very mentally tough, they're not mentally tough 100% of the time, and it's good for us to recognize that in other people. This is somebody I really look up to in this area, but they're not 100 out of 100
Right.
in that area, and it's okay to make mistakes, but we grow from those and we get better. So it's a continual process and a continual, journey. And like I said, it never ends.
Yeah. And when we're thinking about developing character in players, every player is going to be different. You recruit a player, every individual is going to be different. But thinking about how we balance thinking about a person's skills, like an athlete has a lot of skill coming in. So you don't want to necessarily take away that competitive edge either. But how do you kind of balance developing them athletically, but also focusing on that character? What's kind of the things that maybe you did as a coach that maybe helped you to maybe balance both of those things?
Well, if character and developing our young people is important, then you have to take into consideration not only their physical skills and developing those physical skills, teaching them how to shoot a jump shot or teaching them how to throw a curveball or putt or whatever
Yeah.
whatever you're coaching. It's important that you teach those physical skills, but you also have a responsibility to teach them character and dedication and determination and responsibility and integrity, and when those are important to you as a coach, then you're not going to compromise whenever individuals don't meet the standards
Mm.
that you set. And sometimes unfortunately we see that play out in national programs where individuals will maybe get a slap on the wrist because they're a really talented
Right.
player when they break a rule. And if you're a coach who's going to be committed to coaching that, you have to put the program ahead of the player,
Yeah.
and you can't let a player be bigger than the program. So if a player struggles with being responsible or being a good teammate or living up to the standards of excellence that you have within your program, there has to be consequences and things of that nature. So a lot of what you're doing and teaching is by how you interact and how you deal with things that come up. Because a lot of times, they say, that people see what we do more than they listen to what we say.
Yeah.
So if I keep on talking about being a good teammate, but somebody goes out and they miss practice, for some reason, and there's no consequence, or a bad team and there's
Yeah.
no consequence for that, then what's the rest of the team going to think? Oh, it's okay. Coach doesn't really care about that. He just cares about winning.
Right.
So you have to be consistent with what your expectations and those standards of excellence, and make sure that your players are responsible to growing physically, but they're also growing how good they are at practice, how good of a teammate they are.
Yeah.
All the things that you talk about, those are important.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we see these, sometimes we call them character flaws and different things through times where things aren't going great, right? So if, when things are going well, you're winning. A lot of times you don't notice some of these negative things that maybe come out of athletic programs, whether it be nationally, NAIA level, whatever it is. So thinking about failures and different maybe seasons not going well, how do you guide players through moments of failures or times that maybe the season's not going well in ways that strengthens their character rather than diminishing it? Because a lot of times when we think about when things, people, teams are not doing well, you see a lot of these things come out. And how do you kind of guide players and programs through that, even though, because we know not every season is going to be great. There's going to be times where you're rebuilding or whatever the case is, and sometimes you see these things come out. How do you kind of work through those issues?
Part of that is just reframing success. A lot of people think, the results, that's success. If we win a national championship, we were very successful. If we lost every game, we were very unsuccessful. And just reframing what failure is. Failure and setbacks are a part of life. I don't know anybody that can go through life without having some sort of failure or setbacks or struggles or trials or whatever the case might be. So, number one, understanding that that's going to be part of life. And we have an opportunity through sports to teach young people how to deal with failure and setbacks, and reframing failure as an opportunity for growth, I think, is something that I really tried to do throughout my career. We talked about W's and L's, wins and learns.
Oh, yeah.
It's an opportunity. Failure is an opportunity to grow, and when we don't take advantage of the opportunity to reflect back on what happened and make adjustments, it's we've wasted an opportunity. And I talked a lot about, as a coach, expensive and inexpensive experience. And expensive experience is experience you gain when you have to go through it, and you make the struggles, and you make the bad decisions, and you go through failure, and you have to learn from your own mistakes. And inexpensive experiences when you're learning from the failure and struggles that other people are going through, whether it be teammates or whether it be other teams or nationally, whatever the case might be. So we constantly want to look at failure and setbacks as an opportunity to grow and reassess, and really that's how you have to frame it and how you have to learn to go through it. And it's not ever easy at the time, thinking about sickness and thinking about people going through loss, with family members and friends and things like that. It's
Yeah.
it's not easy to go through those things, but we have to be able to move forward, and we can't just dwell on loss and negatives and failure and things of that nature. We have to move on.
Yeah.
And teaching young people how to do that is really, really important. And I think it helps them to be more successful when they face those same types of setbacks in life.
Yeah. And I think, I've talked to a lot of coaches here at Freed-Hardeman and elsewhere as well, and most of them will say the same thing. It's like we learn a lot more as a coach from losing than sometimes winning. Sometimes you can win a game and not feel great about it. Sometimes you can lose a game and say, oh, these are some things we need to work on. This will help us in the long run. And there's a quote that popped up in my head. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but don't ever let a failure slip by without learning from it. So there's like a lot of different ways that you can learn from things that maybe you don't do well. And sometimes that means that you have to go through those struggles and those losses. But then in the long run, say, for example, later on down the season, how to fix that issue that you had early on. So sometimes those things actually end up helping you in the long run. When we're thinking about, too, the perception that other people have of you, I think a lot of times it's always interesting because sometimes thinking about athletes and players, they might not realize how they come across to other people. Maybe we call it self-awareness. And sometimes, we get caught up in the heat of competition. We might not realize how we come across to other people. And the character that we think we have maybe isn't what's seen by other people. So as a coach, from your experience, maybe even as athletic director working with all the different teams, how do you kind of help players recognize maybe the way that they're perceived or maybe the way they come across so that they can maybe improve that? I've looked up some things on this because it's actually something kind of curious to me, how you get that across to players.
Self-awareness is really, really important. And it's something that young people and even older, adults, we all struggle with self-awareness. And I think, John Wooden talked about telling players what they needed to hear, and they'll be mad at you for 3 days,
Yeah.
versus telling a kid what they want to hear, and they'll be mad at you for the rest of their
Yeah.
life. And that's something that's always stuck with me, and just how you need to be honest with your players. And I think specifically about Ryan Wood, who was a pitcher for us 2010 through 13, and he was a graduate assistant for a couple of years, and he went on to be a high school baseball coach, and now he's Dr. Wood and is a principal, and just he's had a great career, a young guy. But I remember him coming into my office when he was a sophomore or junior, and he had really not ever had, many opportunities to pitch for us. And we had a real honest conversation. He said, "Coach," he said, what do I need to do in order to get some innings?" And we had a real honest conversation.
Yeah.
And I said some things that I know for a fact in the moment really hurt his feelings.
Right.
But he took the things that I said and he went out and he worked very, very, very hard to try to improve those areas, and wanted to try to prove some things. And as a senior, he comes out, and about a third of the way through the year, he starts pitching game 3 of our series, and he pitches well, and he gets another opportunity. By the end of the year, he's got a 2.46 ERA, which is one of the top 5 ERAs, single season ERAs. And for a guy who basically had gotten less than 5 innings pitched his freshman through junior year, to have one of the best single season ERAs in the history, this is a guy who took negativity. He wanted to be aware of his weaknesses. I pointed those out to him, and he took advantage of them. And so, I encourage players to be honest with their teammates, because a lot of times teammates will tell each other what they want to hear, you know, and it's very, very important that we as coaches are honest with our players. We're honest with their abilities, but we're also open to, if they go out and improve or work on those things, then we can say, "Hey, I was wrong.
Yeah.
You need to be playing. You are showing that you're doing the things that we want you to do." So having the integrity and the self-awareness as a coach that sometimes we get it wrong as well, is it's important to be able to correct. But, just being honest and truthful, and trying to help them to see what they need to work on and who they are. And, hey, you've got 3 guys ahead of you. Just being honest with them about that. And even during the recruiting process, when you're recruiting players, being honest with them is, "Hey, we think that you have an opportunity to be a really good player. You've got a couple guys in front of you right now, and you're going to have to work really, really hard to pass those guys before you start getting some playing time." I think that maybe will turn people off sometimes, but like I said, I'd rather a person be mad at me for 3 days because I said something that they didn't like versus me telling them.
Wasting a year of their, college career because they've never got, someone deceived them. Yeah. And so, when we're thinking about this too, one of the things I looked up on how to help players be more self-aware, I thought it was interesting, was video analysis. So thinking about, hey, this is how you kind of come across on the field, being able to show a player that. I don't know if that's something you've ever done, but I know there's a lot of video out there now, probably more so than the past 20 years, where you can see pretty much every game you play, and being able to point out maybe certain behaviors. Certain teams kind of become known for things. You've coached long enough where you go to certain places and you're like, yeah, these players kind of act this way. And sometimes they're aware of it, sometimes they're not. Sometimes that's a culture thing, like we've talked about before. But, have you ever done that where you said, hey, this is kind of some things you're doing, this could maybe come across in a way that's not really what we want our program to be about? Has that something you've ever done? I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, we've used video just to point things out like that. I tell you, one of the things that we always did in our program as well is we did evaluations and we filled out surveys, and we actually had teammates, comment on positive and negative traits that they saw within the program, and those individuals that maybe a lot of people pointed out, "Hey, this person tends to have bad body language on the field." We would talk about that. This is what your teammates are seeing, and it was a conversation that we could have. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times during those conversations, those players just looked at you like, "I can't believe that's what people think."
Yeah.
And it really opened their eyes and caused some conversations. Players going back and talking to their teammates and, "Hey, I really want to get better at this. And, I want you to help me. Anytime I start to have bad body language on the field, I want you to point it out to me."
Yeah.
So if they're not aware, they can't improve it and correct it. And, there's some people that are just going to get their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
But, a lot of times they'll come back around to, "Hey, if this 50% of our team thinks I show bad body language,
it's probably true."
It's probably true.
Yeah. And having those tough conversations like you talked about is important. It's better than someone to be mad at you 3 days than to regret something maybe they did throughout their career, and then
Right.
they kind of blame, that nobody really brought